Most people are not destroyed by enemies. They are undone by the people they allow too close. Machiavelli warned that certain personalities drain your power quietly while smiling at you. Miss this, and you will lose position without ever seeing the blade. What follows is not about fear. It is about control, distance, and strategic clarity. By the end, you will recognize who weakens you and why silence is your strongest defense. The first figure Machiavelli would warn you about is the excessively loyal admirer, a presence most people misread as harmless or even beneficial. Loyalty, when balanced, stabilizes power. Loyalty, when excessive, seeks proximity, and proximity seeks access. This person studies you not to learn, but to attach. They echo your opinions, defend you loudly, and position themselves as indispensable. Over time, admiration mutates into entitlement. They believe closeness grants them influence, and influence grants them permission. Power erodes not through open challenge, but through silent overfamiliarity. Such individuals rarely act out of malice. Their danger lies in unconscious hunger. They lack an internal center, so they orbit yours. They borrow your identity to feel significant. Machiavelli understood that people who depend on your position will eventually resent it. When they cannot surpass you, they seek to equalize you. This is when loyalty becomes control, disguised as concern, advice, or protection. The admirer watches patterns. They notice what unsettles you, what excites you, what earns approval. Information accumulates quietly. At first, they use it to please you. Later, they use it to anchor themselves. Distance feels threatening to them because distance restores hierarchy. When you pull back, they feel diminished. This emotional reaction is the warning sign most ignore. Power requires space to breathe. Excessive loyalty collapses that space. It blurs roles, weakens authority, and creates emotional debts you never agreed to repay. The admirer expects access, reassurance, and exceptions. Refusing these feels cruel to the unaware, but necessary to the strategic. Machiavelli knew that mercy without structure invites dependency, and dependency always demands payment. The aware individual does not confront or explain. Explanation invites negotiation. Instead, they recalibrate distance calmly. Less disclosure, fewer favors, neutral warmth without intimacy. This preserves dominance without hostility. Most people lose power because they fear appearing cold. In reality, restraint is clarity. Admiration should flow one way, never inward. When someone needs you too much, they are already too close, and closeness is where leverage is born. Unchecked. This dynamic also reshapes how others perceive you. Authority diluted by familiarity loses gravity. Observers sense when boundaries soften and respond accordingly. The admirer may speak for you, anticipate you, or correct others on your behalf, slowly replacing your presence. Power that is shared informally is no longer power. It becomes a habit others feel entitled to test. That is how dominance fades without conflict or resistance. The emotionally reactive individual appears passionate, expressive, and authentic, which is why most people misjudge them as trustworthy. Machiavelli saw through this illusion. Emotional reactivity is not honesty, it is lack of command. A person who cannot govern their inner state will always be governed by circumstances, and anyone tied to them inherits that instability. Power cannot rest on unpredictable ground. What feels like intensity in calm moments becomes exposure under pressure. Such individuals respond before they observe. Their words precede their thoughts, and their actions precede their strategy. In private, this seems manageable. In public, it becomes dangerous. When status is challenged or stress rises, they leak information, escalate conflict, or force emotional decisions that cannot be reversed. Machiavelli understood that silence is a weapon precisely because most people cannot hold it. The reactive person despises silence because it denies them release. Their volatility also creates leverage for others. Once your environment contains someone emotionally transparent, outsiders read the room through them. Their reactions reveal alliances, priorities, and fractures. They become an open signal in a game that rewards ambiguity. Even when loyal, they betray unintentionally. Their face, tone, and timing speak when they should not. This is not treachery, but it produces the same result. Emotionally reactive individuals often justify themselves with sincerity. They claim they are simply being real, as if authenticity excuses lack of discipline. Machiavelli would call this self-deception. Real power is invisible. It delays response, controls expression, and chooses when emotion serves strategy. The reactive person believes expression is strength. In reality, expression without control is surrender. Over time, association with such a person reshapes your own posture. You begin managing their moods, anticipating their reactions and softening your positions to avoid outbursts. This is how dominance shifts quietly. Your energy moves from direction to containment. You become reactive by proximity. Machiavelli warned that leaders fall not because they lack vision, but because they allow others to dictate emotional tempo. The danger deepens because reactive individuals often demand emotional alignment. If you remain calm while they escalate, they interpret restraint as indifference or betrayal. They pressure you to react, choose sides, or validate their impulses. Refusing makes you the villain. Complying makes you exposed. Either way, your strategic neutrality erodes. Power depends on timing, and timing collapses in emotional storms. The aware individual does not attempt to correct or soothe long-term. Correction invites resistance. Soothing invites dependence. Instead, they reduce access. Conversations shorten. Topics narrow. Decisions move away from emotional space into structured distance. This is not cruelty. It is containment. Machiavelli believed that self-command was the highest form of authority, and those without it should never be close to the center. In environments of power, calm is read as competence. Volatility is read as weakness. The emotionally reactive person may feel alive, expressive, and intense, but intensity is not control. Those who master themselves set the rhythm. Those who cannot are always late, always loud, and always one reaction away from collapse. The chronic victim is one of the most misunderstood dangers Machiavelli would have you avoid. On the surface, they appear harmless, wounded, even deserving of protection. Most people instinctively soften around them. That softness is precisely where power begins to leak. The victim narrative is not defined by suffering, but by interpretation. Everyone suffers. Very few turn suffering into an identity. When someone does, they surrender agency while quietly demanding compensation from the world. This person explains life exclusively through injustice. Outcomes are never earned or caused, only imposed. Responsibility is always external. At first, this seems like vulnerability. In reality, it is a refusal to self-govern. Machiavelli understood that those who do not see themselves as actors will never behave like partners. They become dependents, and dependency always hides resentment. They need you, but they also despise the position that makes you unnecessary. The danger intensifies because victimhood grants moral leverage. The chronic victim does not need to outperform you to challenge you. They need only imply that they are disadvantaged and you are not. This subtle contrast poisons dynamics. Any boundary you set feels like cruelty. Any authority you exercise feels like oppression. Over time, you are pressured to justify strength, success, or emotional neutrality. Power that must constantly explain itself is already weakened. Machiavelli warned that people who believe they are owed will eventually collect, one way or another. When expectations are unmet, bitterness grows. The victim begins to rewrite history. Your support becomes insufficient. Your neutrality becomes betrayal. Your success becomes evidence of unfairness. They feel entitled to sympathy, access, and protection, yet feel no obligation to reciprocate loyalty. In their internal logic, the world already wronged them, so they are permitted to rebalance it. This mindset also corrodes judgment. Because the victim believes outcomes are predetermined against them, they justify shortcuts. Truth becomes flexible. Loyalty becomes conditional. They may exaggerate, manipulate perception, or align with stronger forces if it promises relief from their internal narrative. Machiavelli knew that people who feel morally justified are capable of extreme inconsistency. They do not see betrayal as betrayal. They see it as survival. Another subtle risk lies in emotional gravity. Victimhood pulls attention inward. Conversations orbit their struggles, their frustrations, their unmet needs. Progress stalls, momentum slows. You expend energy stabilizing emotions instead of advancing direction. Over time, you begin editing your ambitions to avoid triggering their sense of injustice. This is how the victim reshapes the environment without issuing a single demand. Power drains through accommodation. The aware individual recognizes that compassion without structure is dangerous. Support must be temporary, conditional, and bounded. Machiavelli did not oppose mercy. He opposed mercy that undermines authority. When the victim resists growth, rejects accountability, or reacts defensively to self-reflection, distance becomes necessary. Not punishment, not confrontation, distance. Proximity validates identity. Distance forces reckoning. It is critical to understand that the chronic victim is not weak. Weakness implies limitation. This is something else. It is a strategy, often unconscious, that trades responsibility for leverage. Most people fall into its orbit because they fear appearing cold. The strategic mind knows that clarity is not cruelty. Those who refuse to step into agency will always pull others down to maintain psychological balance. In the end, Machiavelli would remind you that power aligns with those who accept causality. People who see themselves as actors can be reasoned with, negotiated with, and trusted under pressure. Those who see themselves as victims are governed by grievance. Grievance does not negotiate, it accumulates. And when it finally moves, it does so without warning, convinced it is justified. The overly moral performer is one of the most deceptive figures Machiavelli would caution you against, because they do not seek power through competence or strategy, but through appearance. They do not live by principles, they display them. Their morality is theatrical, designed for observation, approval, and leverage. Most people confuse visible virtue with actual integrity. Machiavelli understood that what is shown loudly is often what is absent privately. This individual speaks often about what is right, fair, ethical, or proper. They frame themselves as guardians of values, positioning others beneath their moral altitude. This creates an asymmetry. By defining themselves as righteous, they implicitly define disagreement as wrongdoing. Power shifts the moment you feel the need to justify yourself morally rather than strategically. That is their objective, whether conscious or not. Public morality is a tool. When wielded quietly, it guides behavior. When wielded loudly, it controls it. The moral performer uses principles selectively, applying them where it benefits their position and ignoring them where it costs them leverage. Machiavelli warned that those who cloak ambition in virtue are the most dangerous, because they believe their actions are justified. They are not restrained by consistency, only by optics. Their greatest weapon is social pressure. They do not attack directly. They imply. They raise eyebrows. They reference standards without naming names. They let others fill in the accusation. This preserves plausible deniability while damaging reputations. In environments where perception matters, this is devastating. Once morality becomes performative, truth becomes secondary to alignment. Power then flows toward whoever controls the narrative of goodness. Another danger lies in predictability. The moral performer believes their virtue makes them untouchable. They expect protection from scrutiny because they appear principled. This false security emboldens them. They intervene where they should observe. They moralize where silence would be wiser. They overextend. Machiavelli knew that restraint is power precisely because it hides intention. The moral performer cannot restrain themselves. They must be seen. Over time, their presence changes how decisions are made. Strategy becomes filtered through fear of moral judgment. Efficiency is sacrificed for appearance. Necessary actions are delayed or softened to avoid criticism. This weakens leadership and confuses authority. Those who operate quietly begin to withdraw, while those skilled in signaling virtue rise. The environment shifts from results-based to perception-based. Once this happens, real power leaves the room. The moral performer is also inconsistent under pressure. When their values conflict with self-interest always wins. But the shift is subtle. They rationalize, they redefine principles. They frame compromise as necessity and obedience as wisdom. Machiavelli would note that this flexibility is not intelligence, but opportunism disguised as conscience. The danger is not hypocrisy itself, but hypocrisy that claims moral high ground. The aware individual does not confront moral performers publicly. That grants them the stage they crave. Exposure strengthens them because they thrive on conflict framed as virtue versus vice. Instead, the strategic response is neutrality and precision. Do not argue values. Do not defend intentions. Operate through outcomes and documentation. Moral performers lose influence where clarity replaces ambiguity and results replace rhetoric. Distance is essential. Moral performers seek proximity to authority because it legitimizes them. When kept at arm's length, their influence diminishes. They rely on visibility, remove the spotlight, and their power fades. Machiavelli understood that denying someone relevance is more effective than challenging them directly. Silence starves what attention feeds. It is also important to recognize why most people fall under their influence. People want to be seen as good. Moral performers exploit this need. They make agreement feel virtuous and disagreement feel dangerous. The strategic mind resists this pull. Power does not require moral applause. It requires coherence, restraint, and timing. True morality is quiet. It does not advertise itself or demand recognition. It operates consistently even when unseen. Machiavelli did not argue against ethics. He argued against naivete. Those who mistake performance for principle surrender judgment. And when judgment is surrendered, control follows soon after. The information collector is rarely perceived as a threat because they present themselves as attentive, curious, and engaged. They listen more than they speak. They ask thoughtful questions. They remember details others forget. To the unaware, this feels like intelligence or care. Machiavelli recognized it as positioning. Information is never neutral. It is accumulated with intent, even when the collector has not yet decided how it will be used. This person does not pry aggressively. They let you speak. Silence is their invitation. They nod, encourage, and create a sense of safety that lowers your guard. Over time, you reveal patterns, what you fear, what motivates you, where your limits are, who you distrust. None of this feels dangerous in isolation. Together, it forms a psychological map. Power is not built by knowing facts, but by understanding leverage, and leverage begins with pattern recognition. The collector rarely reciprocates disclosure. When they do, it is calculated. They offer controlled vulnerability to invite deeper trust, never enough to weaken themselves. This asymmetry is intentional. Machiavelli understood that those who know more than they reveal always occupy the higher ground. Conversation becomes extraction rather than exchange. The unaware mistake this imbalance for wisdom. In reality, it is advantage. Their danger multiplies in social environments. The information collector becomes a hub. Others confide in them because they feel heard. Stories pass through them, subtly altered, selectively shared. They frame narratives without appearing to author them. When conflict arises, they already know where fault lines exist. They can inflame or soothe simply by choosing what to mention and what to omit. Machiavelli warned that control of information is control of outcomes. Even when they claim loyalty, the risk remains. Loyalty does not negate leverage. The moment circumstances shift, information changes value. What was once harmless context becomes currency. The collector may never betray overtly, yet their mere possession of knowledge alters power dynamics. You begin to self-censor. You hesitate. You anticipate how your words might travel. This is how influence works without force. The collector also benefits from plausible innocence. If confronted, they appear confused. They were only listening, only trying to understand, only being helpful. This deniability makes them difficult to challenge without appearing paranoid or insecure. Machiavelli understood that the most effective operators never look like operators. They look useful. Another overlooked risk is dependence. Once someone becomes your primary listener, you unconsciously rely on them to process thoughts, frustrations, and decisions. This creates cognitive outsourcing. They begin shaping your interpretations by how they respond, what they affirm, and what they ignore. Influence deepens not through advice, but through framing. Over time, you may find your own thinking subtly aligning with their reactions. Power shifts internally before it ever becomes visible. The aware individual treats information as a strategic asset, not an emotional release. They understand that speech creates trails. Every disclosure narrows future options. Machiavelli valued silence not as secrecy, but as flexibility. When little is known about you, assumptions work in your favor. When too much is known, others anticipate you. Predictability is vulnerability. This does not require isolation or paranoia. It requires calibration. Share facts, not interpretations. Outcomes, not emotions. Decisions, not doubts. The collector thrives on ambiguity and inner conflict. Remove those, and their leverage weakens. When conversations remain surface, level and role, defined, extraction fails. Distance again becomes critical. Information collectors seek proximity to decision makers, not to influence directly, but to observe process. When access is limited, their relevance declines. Machiavelli understood that control of access is control of power. You do not need to accuse or expose. You simply stop feeding the machine. Most people reveal too much because they equate openness with strength. The strategic mind knows that strength is optional visibility. Silence does not mean absence, it means discipline. The less you explain yourself, the more room you retain to move. In the end, the information collector is dangerous not because they are malicious, but because they are prepared. They wait, they observe, they accumulate. And when conditions shift, they already know exactly where to apply pressure. The inconsistent ally is more dangerous than an open opponent because their instability forces you to operate without ground. One day they align with you, affirm your direction, and offer support. The next, they withdraw, hesitate, or reposition themselves without explanation. Most people interpret this as complexity or emotional nuance. Machiavelli recognized it as structural weakness. Power cannot be built on shifting foundations. This person does not betray openly. They fluctuate. Their loyalty depends on mood, audience, or perceived advantage. When things are calm, they stand close. When pressure appears, they retreat. This pattern creates uncertainty, and uncertainty demands attention. You begin tracking signals instead of executing strategy. Your focus shifts from forward movement to constant recalibration. That is how momentum dies quietly. Inconsistent allies often justify themselves with ambiguity. They say they are weighing options, staying flexible, or avoiding conflict. On the surface, this sounds prudent. In reality, it reveals fear of commitment. Machiavelli understood that neutrality in moments of consequence is not wisdom, it is self-preservation at the expense of alignment. Such people want the benefits of association without the costs of loyalty. Their unpredictability also erodes trust beyond the immediate relationship. Others notice hesitation. They sense gaps. Authority weakens when support appears conditional. Even if your position remains unchanged, perception shifts. Power is not only what you hold, but what others believe you can hold under pressure. An unstable ally signals fragility, whether you intend it or not. Another danger lies in timing. Inconsistent allies tend to choose the worst moments to hesitate. When decisive action is required, they delay. When silence is necessary, they speak. Their internal confusion leaks outward. Machiavelli warned that hesitation at critical moments invites opposition. Enemies act while you wait. Opportunities pass while you assess. The cost is rarely immediate, but it is cumulative. Over time, you may begin compensating for their unreliability. You soften positions to keep them close. You delay decisions to maintain consensus. You over-communicate to reduce their uncertainty. Each adjustment seems minor. Together, they reshape your leadership posture. You move from command to appeasement without realizing when the shift occurred. Power is lost incrementally, never announced. Inconsistent allies also tend to rewrite narratives after outcomes are clear. If a decision succeeds, they imply quiet support. If it fails, they distance themselves or suggest reservations they never voiced. This retroactive positioning protects their image while isolating you. Machiavelli understood that those who fear risk will always claim foresight after the fact. Their loyalty exists only where it is safe. Their presence creates a false sense of numbers. You believe you have backing until you need it. When pressure arrives, support evaporates, leaving you exposed. This is more damaging than having fewer allies because it distorts planning. Strategy built on assumed support collapses when assumptions prove false. True power prefers fewer, reliable alignments over many unstable ones. The aware individual values consistency over enthusiasm. Loud support means nothing if it dissolves under strain. Machiavelli believed that reliability is a form of strength precisely because it is rare. Those who commit quietly and stand firm under pressure are worth 10 enthusiastic but wavering allies. Consistency allows foresight. It allows planning. It allows calm. The strategic response to inconsistency is not confrontation. Confrontation invites denial and rationalization. Instead, the response is structural adjustment. Reduce dependence. Limit shared exposure, shift critical decisions away from unreliable hands, keep interaction professional, measured, and narrow. You do not punish inconsistency. You neutralize its impact. It is important to understand why inconsistent allies gravitate toward power. They seek security without responsibility. They want proximity to strength without being tested by it. Machiavelli would note that such individuals are drawn to leaders not to support them, but to shield themselves from consequences. When danger appears, they step aside, preserving themselves while the leader absorbs the risk. Most people tolerate inconsistency because they confuse loyalty with familiarity. They fear losing connections. The strategic mind understands that connections which weaken execution are liabilities, not assets. Power demands clarity. Clarity demands commitment. Where commitment is absent, structure must compensate. Consistency does not require agreement on everything. It requires predictability under pressure. You must know how someone behaves when stakes rise. If their pattern is hesitation, withdrawal, or self-protection, they cannot be close to the center. This is not judgment. It is assessment. Power does not collapse from attack alone. It collapses from instability within. The inconsistent ally introduces that instability quietly, repeatedly, and without malice. That is what makes them dangerous. The quiet competitor disguised as a friend is the most refined danger Machiavelli would expect you to miss. They do not rush. They do not challenge. They do not announce ambition. They stand close enough to observe, far enough to remain unnoticed. Where others seek recognition, they seek comprehension. This restraint is not humility, it is preparation. Power rarely approaches loudly. It studies first. This individual mirrors cooperation while maintaining internal separation. They support without committing, agree without investing, and praise without revealing intention. Their friendliness is functional. It grants access. They learn how decisions are made, who influences whom, where hesitation appears, and which levers move outcomes. None of this requires betrayal. Observation alone builds advantage. Machiavelli understood that those who master patience inherit the field when others reveal themselves too early. What makes this competitor dangerous is discipline. They do not react emotionally. They do not overexpose. They do not rush to claim credit. They allow others to exhaust themselves asserting dominance while they conserve energy. Their silence is misread as loyalty or lack of ambition. In reality, it is camouflage. Ambition concealed lasts longer than ambition displayed. They rarely oppose you directly. Opposition reveals position. Instead, they wait for moments of natural weakness, transition, fatigue, public scrutiny, or internal doubt. When such moments arise, they adjust subtly. A withheld endorsement, a carefully timed suggestion, a neutral comment that shifts perception without owning the shift. Influence without fingerprints is the highest form of power. Machiavelli respected this archetype because it operates according to reality rather than emotion. The quiet competitor understands that hierarchy is fluid, not fixed. They do not need to defeat you. They only need to outlast you. They let time, circumstance, and missteps do the work. Most people lose power not because they are overthrown, but because someone more patient is waiting. This competitor also benefits from proximity. By remaining close, they absorb reflected credibility. Others associate them with your authority. If your position weakens, they inherit familiarity. If your position strengthens, they gain insulation. This asymmetry favors them in every outcome. Machiavelli warned that proximity without allegiance is the most dangerous position in any court. Another layer of risk lies in comparison. Because they do not challenge openly, observers begin comparing silently. Who is calmer? Who listens more? Who appears less reactive? Over time, the quiet competitor may seem more stable simply because they have not been tested publicly. This perceived composure becomes a resource. When pressure arrives, perception often decides faster than truth. The quiet competitor also understands narrative timing. They do not speak early. They wait until an interpretation has momentum, then align with it. This makes them appear perceptive rather than opportunistic. By the time their position is visible, it feels inevitable. Machiavelli knew that inevitability is more powerful than force. People align with what feels already decided. The aware individual does not attempt to expose this type. Exposure fails because there is nothing obvious to reveal. The competitor has committed no visible offense. Accusation without proof weakens the accuser. Instead, the strategic response is structural clarity. Define roles sharply. Limit informal access. Separate observation from influence. When responsibilities are explicit and boundaries firm, silent accumulation loses effectiveness. Distance again becomes decisive. Not emotional distance, but operational distance. Fewer unscheduled conversations. Fewer shared deliberations. Information becomes compartmentalized. This is not paranoia. It is governance. Machiavelli understood that power survives through architecture, not suspicion. When systems are clear, intentions matter less. It is also essential to control tempo. Quiet competitors thrive in slow ambiguity. They exploit delay and indecision. When decisions are timely and execution decisive, their window narrows. Speed, when paired with accuracy, deprives them of space to maneuver. Power that moves cleanly leaves little residue to study. Most people underestimate this danger because they equate threat with aggression. The quiet competitor is not aggressive. They are adaptive. They do not seek to dominate immediately. They seek position. Once position is secured, dominance requires little effort. Machiavelli would note that the most effective coups occur without confrontation because confrontation alerts defenders. The final risk is internal. The presence of a quiet competitor can dull your own edge. Their calm may tempt you into overconfidence. Their agreement may reduce vigilance. Their patience may encourage delay. This is how power erodes from comfort, not conflict. The strategic mind resists comfort. It treats calm not as safety, but as a phase to be managed. In the end, Machiavelli would not tell you to fear this person. Fear clouds judgment. He would tell you to respect the method. Patience, observation, restraint, and timing are tools. When you encounter them in another, you must respond with structure, clarity, and controlled distance. Power does not belong to the loudest or the closest. It belongs to the most aware. Most people lose power because they confuse closeness with safety. If this sharpened your awareness, like and subscribe. You do not need more allies. You need fewer exposures.